Intel was the biggest, most powerful chip company in the world. And then they started leaving. And they started going to foreign countries, in particular Taiwan. And if we had a president that would have said, okay, you can go to Taiwan, but we're going to put a 100% tariff or 200 or 300 or 500% tariff, anybody that sells into the United States has to pay, they wouldn't have left.
Donald Trump has just executed one of the most radical economic decisions in modern American history. The U.S. government is now the proud owner of nearly 10% of Intel, one of the most important technology companies in the world. This is not a trade tariff, not a regulation tweak, not another campaign promise. It is a direct, $8.9 billion stake in a private company that powers the backbone of America's economy and national security. Intel is not just another corporation. It designs and manufactures semiconductors, the tiny chips that run everything from smartphones to fighter jets, from banking systems to artificial intelligence. Without chips, the global economy doesn't function. And until now, America has been dangerously dependent on foreign suppliers, especially Taiwan and South Korea, leaving the U.S. exposed to global trade shocks, Chinese competition, and military risks in the Pacific. Trump has been warning for years that America's reliance on Asia for critical technology is a ticking time bomb. Now he has detonated a solution by taking the unprecedented step of putting the government's money directly into the fight. Think about what this means. The President of the United States has chosen not to stand on the sidelines and hope corporations solve the problem, but to inject billions of taxpayer dollars into America's most critical tech company. Critics call it a bailout for a failing giant. After all, Intel lost a staggering $18.8 billion in 2024, bleeding market share to foreign competitors. But Trump frames it as a national security investment, a trade weapon, and an economic declaration of war on China's tech ambitions. For decades, Washington has played defense, responding to supply chain shortages, sanctioning Chinese companies, or begging allies to share production capacity. This time, Trump is playing offense. He has declared that the U.S. government itself will own part of the semiconductor industry, guaranteeing America a seat at the table in the most important market of the 21st century. And make no mistake, this is not just about Intel, it's about the balance of global power. Whoever controls the semiconductor supply controls the future of artificial intelligence, the future of energy, the future of the military, and ultimately the future of global trade. Trump knows it. Beijing knows it. Wall Street knows it. That's why this announcement is already shaking markets, alarming America's rivals, and forcing every U.S. ally to ask the same question: if Washington is ready to buy into Intel, what's next? NVIDIA? AMD? Entire industries? This is not capitalism as usual. This is a direct merger of government and business at the highest level. It's a message to China that America will not just compete, it will dominate. It's a warning to U.S. corporations that if they can't deliver, the government will step in. And it's a promise to the American people that Trump is willing to rewrite the rules of economics to make America powerful again. Whether this gamble saves the U.S. economy or destabilizes it forever is the question that now hangs over Wall Street, Washington, and the world. Here is what makes this deal explosive: Intel was not bought into strength, it was bought into weakness. The company has been bleeding cash and losing ground for years. In 2024 alone, Intel reported a staggering $18.8 billion loss, its worst performance in decades. Competitors like Taiwan's TSMC and South Korea's Samsung have been dominating the global semiconductor race, producing faster, cheaper, and more advanced chips, while Intel's delays in innovation nearly pushed it to irrelevance. Wall Street had lost faith. Investors were moving toward NVIDIA for AI chips and toward Asian firms for reliable manufacturing. Yet Trump didn't see a failing company, he saw an opportunity to weaponize Intel as a strategic trade asset. Under the CHIPS and Science Act, billions had already been earmarked to revive U.S. chipmaking. But Trump's move went beyond subsidies or tax breaks. He used taxpayer dollars to purchase nearly 10% of Intel outright, giving Washington not just influence but ownership. Officially, it's called a non-voting stake, which means the government will not dictate Intel's daily operations. But let's be realistic, When Washington is on your shareholder list with billions invested, every decision suddenly carries national weight. This isn't Intel's fight anymore, it's America's fight. By injecting $8.9 billion directly, Trump turned a private corporate struggle into a U.S. trade mission, placing chips on the same level as energy, defense, and currency power. Critics instantly branded it a bailout, arguing that the government should never risk taxpayer money to rescue a failing company. But Trump supporters counter that this is not about bailing out Intel, it's about securing America's future. Imagine what happens if Taiwan falls under Chinese influence or if global shipping lanes collapse during a conflict. The US military, financial systems, and everyday consumer technology would grind to a halt. Trump knows this is not just economics, it's survival. By anchoring Intel to the US government, he effectively locked the company into America's national defense strategy. And this is only the beginning. Reports are already circulating that the administration is eyeing similar stakes in Nvidia and AMD, turning America's semiconductor landscape into a semi-nationalized industry. If that happens, Washington won't just influence the market, it will own it. That's why this single deal with Intel is already sending shockwaves across Wall Street, Beijing, and Silicon Valley. It's not a one-time rescue, it's the start of a new era where government and business merge in the name of trade dominance. This Intel deal is not just about rescuing one company, it's about controlling the future battlefield of global trade. Chips are no longer a tech product, they are the foundation of every modern economy. They decide who dominates artificial intelligence, who leads in electric vehicles, who commands the defense industry, and who controls global finance. Trump knows that whoever holds the semiconductor supply chain holds the keys to world power. Right now, America is dangerously behind. Taiwan's TSMC alone produces over 60% of the world's advanced chips, and its facilities sit just miles from China's coastline, in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. If Beijing were to take control of Taiwan, America's tech supply lines would collapse overnight. Every iPhone, every data center, every AI supercomputer in Silicon Valley would suddenly depend on Chinese approval. That is not just an economic risk, it's a national security crisis. Trump's investment in Intel is a preemptive strike against this vulnerability. By pumping billions directly into U.S. chip production, he is signaling to the world that America will no longer sit back and let Asia dictate the terms of the digital economy. This is not a subsidy, not a trade tariff, not even a corporate partnership. This is direct state intervention into the global tech war, and it has one target: China. Beijing has been spending billions on its own chip companies, racing to free itself from US technology. They've poured resources into SMIC, their national semiconductor champion, and have used state-backed loans, subsidies, and forced technology transfers to accelerate growth. Europe, too, has scrambled with its own EU Chips Act, trying to carve out space in the market. But Trump's move raises the stakes to a new level. He is saying America itself will compete, dollar for dollar, with governments around the world. This changes everything. Foreign leaders now have to calculate not just against American corporations, but against the US government's financial muscle. That makes Intel not just a company, it makes it an arm of US economic policy. And here's the catch: once Washington owns a stake in a company, trade decisions are no longer just about business, they become about geopolitics. Every future tariff, every export restriction, every supply chain decision will now run through the lens of protecting the government's investment. That gives Trump leverage unlike any president before him. For decades, US trade wars were fought with tariffs, sanctions, and negotiations. Now, Trump is fighting it with ownership. The US is not just setting the rules of the game anymore, it's buying the pieces of the board. And that leaves rivals scrambling to figure out how far Washington is willing to go. Will America buy into Nvidia, the global AI chip leader? Will it put money into AMD to create a second powerhouse against Asia? The moment Trump turned Intel into a government-backed asset, the semiconductor trade war escalated from corporate competition into direct state conflict. And in that new battlefield, the US just declared it will not lose. The real question now is whether Trump's Intel gamble will rescue America's economy or expose it to massive new risks. Supporters call it genius. By investing billions in a struggling giant, Trump is forcing Intel to accelerate production, build cutting-edge fabs on U.S. soil, and create tens of thousands of high-paying jobs. They argue this move will ripple across the entire economy, sparking a boom in construction, manufacturing, research, and defense contracts. In their view, it's the bold shot in the arm America needs to regain leadership in technology, break free from Chinese supply chains, and restore trade dominance. Wall Street optimists are already betting that Intel's stock will soar with the U.S. government as a backer. For them, Trump has done what no other president dared to do, turn corporate weakness into national strength. But critics see a far darker picture. They argue this is not capitalism, it's the beginning of state-run economics, where Washington decides which companies live and which companies die. By buying into Intel, Trump has set a precedent: if a company is strategically important, the government will step in with taxpayer money. Today it's chips, tomorrow it could be airlines, automakers, or even Wall Street banks. That raises the nightmare of moral hazard, where failing corporations take reckless risks knowing Uncle Sam will rescue them. And make no mistake, Intel is still in deep trouble. Its losses in 2024 weren't a one-time blip, they were the result of years of mismanagement, product delays, and brutal competition from Asia. Even with $8.9 billion in government backing, there is no guarantee Intel can catch up to TSMC's technological edge or Nvidia's dominance in AI chips. If Intel stumbles again, will Washington keep writing checks? Will taxpayers be forced into endless bailouts of a failing industry? That fear is already spreading on Wall Street. Some investors warn that Trump's move will distort markets, scare off private capital, and politicize America's most innovative industries. After all, who wants to invest in a company where the U.S. government sits on the board as a shareholder? Others point out that foreign governments could retaliate. China could step up subsidies for its own companies. Europe could block U.S. firms from entering their markets. Trade wars could intensify not with tariffs but with government checkbooks, each nation pouring billions into national champions. In that world, global competition stops being about innovation and starts being about state intervention, a game where taxpayers always foot the bill. And this is the razor's edge Trump is walking. If his gamble works, America could regain tech dominance, secure its supply chains, and unleash an economic boom that cements U.S. trade power for decades. If it fails, America could be left with bloated, government-dependent corporations, wasted billions, and a distorted economy that no longer runs on free market principles. That's why this Intel deal isn't just a business story, it's a test of the entire American economic model. What makes Trump's Intel move so explosive is not just what it does today, it's what it sets up for tomorrow. This is not the end of a policy, it's the beginning of a new economic doctrine: America first, by force if necessary. For decades, U.S. presidents talked about reshoring jobs, protecting industries, and breaking dependence on China, but it was all words, minor tariffs, and symbolic acts. Trump has just rewritten the playbook. He didn't wait for Intel to fix itself. He didn't hope for market forces to magically solve America's biggest vulnerability. He took $8.9 billion of taxpayer money and bought a seat at the table of one of the most critical industries in the world. That single decision sends a message louder than any speech: the United States is willing to directly own the future of technology. And that changes the global game. Already, analysts are warning that if Washington owns Intel, then China may nationalize its own chip giants outright. Europe may double down on subsidies for ASML and STMicro. Japan and South Korea may tighten control of their corporate champions. What starts as one U.S. investment could spiral into a global race of governments taking control of private industries. That means the future of trade will not be decided in boardrooms, it will be decided in presidential offices and parliaments. The rules of capitalism are being rewritten in real time, and Trump is holding the pen. But here's the cliffhanger: does this bold gamble actually deliver? Intel is still behind in the technology race. TSMC is still far ahead in advanced chipmaking. Nvidia is still the king of AI processors. China is still pouring billions into its semiconductor ambitions. Trump's stake in Intel doesn't guarantee victory, it guarantees a fight. The stakes are massive. If Intel rises, America reclaims leadership of the digital economy, secures its supply chains, and proves that Trump's direct ownership model works. If Intel fails, America risks exposing itself as vulnerable, desperate, and wasteful, having burned billions on a company that couldn't compete. That's why this deal is bigger than Intel, bigger than semiconductors, bigger than tech. It's about the future of the US economy itself. Are we entering an era where government steps in to control strategic industries, using taxpayer money to fight global trade wars? Or is this just the first step in a Trump-led revolution that restores American dominance by sheer force of will? Every investor, every world leader, and every American voter is now watching the same question: did Trump just save the US economy, or did he just gamble it on a company that lost $18.8 billion in 1 year? That's the uncertainty, that's the risk, and that's the fight that will define not just the next election, but the next century of American power.